Two legends, one winner. Here's what happened when Steven Seagal fought against Frank Dux. It began with a challenge that wasn't supposed to leave the room. One quiet conversation between two respected figures in the Los Angeles martial arts scene set in motion an encounter that fans had argued about for decades. What would happen when Steven Seagal fought Frank Dux? Both men were famous, both controversial, and both unshakably confident in their abilities, but for entirely different reasons. When fate put them on the same mat in front of a select silent audience in North Hollywood, the argument stopped and the fight began. It was a fight that would push each man to the brink, with the outcome being decided in the final electrifying moments. The spectators were watching a fight between two completely different characters. Steven Seagal was a towering figure, both literally and in the martial arts world. Over 6'4", with a calm, deliberate presence, he wasn't the kind of man who looked hurried or flustered. His training history was well documented. Years spent in Japan, earning high ranks in aikido and aikido, even becoming the first foreigner to run an aikido dojo there. He'd served as a martial arts coordinator in films before moving into acting himself, where his style, based on control, redirection, and joint locks, stood out from the high-kicking acrobatic techniques of other movie stars. Frank Dux, by contrast, was a man whose fame was wrapped in mystery. He claimed to have been trained in Koga Yamabushi ninjutsu under a master named Senzo Tanaka, spending years learning techniques of stealth, speed, and precision. His name exploded into popular culture after the release of Bloodsport, a film said to be based on his real-life experiences in a secretive tournament known as the Kumite. The movie's closing captions boasted extraordinary achievements: 56 consecutive knockouts, fastest knockout time, and over 300 wins. But while these numbers fired imaginations, they were never independently verified. In martial arts circles, his story was as divisive as it was famous. By the late 1990s, Seagal and Dux were both well-known names in the martial arts community, though for very different reasons. Seagal had a proven, if sometimes polarizing, track record as a legitimate instructor and practitioner. Dux had the mystique of a man who claimed to have fought and won in a hidden world that few believed existed. On paper, they seemed destined to clash, but few thought it would ever actually happen. That changed when both were invited to a private martial arts exhibition in North Hollywood. The event wasn't open to the public, and there were no plans to film it. The guest list was made up of high-level instructors, stunt coordinators, and fight choreographers, people who lived and breathed martial arts for a living. The idea was to bring together practitioners from different styles to demonstrate techniques and exchange ideas. At least, that was the plan. As the day drew closer, whispers began to circulate among the attendees. Seagal and Dux were both confirmed to appear, and neither man seemed interested in merely showing off rehearsed moves. There was talk of a friendly sparring match between the two, something that would test skills without the pretense of a staged fight. The possibility was enough to make the atmosphere crackle with anticipation. Seagal arrived first, wearing a plain black jai and moving with his usual unhurried confidence. He greeted a few people quietly, then stepped onto the mat to stretch and roll his shoulders. At his height, he looked even larger in the close quarters of the dojo, his movements economical, but purposeful. Dux entered a few minutes later in a white GI with a black belt tied snugly at the waist. He scanned the room, his eyes sharp, then exchanged nods with a few familiar faces. He looked lighter on his feet, shifting his weight easily as he warmed up with short, crisp movements. The two men shook hands briefly, firm grips, direct eye contact, but no small talk. Whatever mutual respect existed between them was tempered by a silent challenge. The referee, a senior instructor respected for his impartiality, stepped between them and laid out the rules. It would be full contact sparring, but with restrictions. No head strikes, no intent to injure, and the match would last until either the time ran out or one man gained a decisive advantage. Both agreed without hesitation. The moment they squared off, the room fell silent. The handful of spectators leaned forward in their seats. Seagal stood upright, his stance open but grounded, hands ready to intercept rather than strike first. Dux adopted a looser, more mobile posture, his weight shifting as he bounced lightly on the balls of his feet. For the first 10 seconds they circled, testing distance. Dux moved first with a quick jab, and Seagal responded by angling his body slightly, keeping the smaller man just outside his reach. Then Dux darted forward, throwing a low kick towards Seagal's shin. Seagal let it glance off his leg, stepping forward at the same time to check Dux's movement with a light palm to the chest. They separated again, eyes locked. Dux struck next, this time with a burst of speed, a jab to the torso, a hook toward the side. Seagal's left arm rose to block the jab, his right hand catching the hook mid-swing. With a quick turn, he shifted Dux's momentum, applying a standing joint lock that forced him to bend slightly. Dux twisted free almost instantly, regaining his stance. The spectators murmured, impressed by the speed of both the attack and the counter. Dux began using feints to disguise his real intentions, showing a low kick before snapping a strike toward Seagal's ribs, then retreating before the larger man could close in. Seagal stayed patient, letting Dux expend energy while he maintained control of the center of the mat. Then Dux found his first clean shot. Timing his entry perfectly, he slipped inside Seagal's reach and delivered a short, snapping punch to the body. It wasn't enough to hurt, but it landed with precision. He followed with another strike, this one grazing Seagal's side before the taller man pivoted away. Seagal's counter was almost immediate. As Dux tried to press forward, Seagal's hand shot out, gripping his wrist and pulling him forward into a sweeping motion. Dux stumbled for half a step before catching himself spinning free with a quick roll. The exchanges were quick, measured, and tense. Each time one man seemed to gain an advantage, the other found a way to reset. The physical contest was matched by a psychological one. Neither wanted to show frustration, nor did they want to give the other the satisfaction of seeing doubt. Halfway through the match, the pace shifted. Dux launched another attack, feinting high before sweeping low at Seagal's lead leg. This time the sweep connected, forcing Seagal to adjust his footing. Dux pounced with a short elbow strike to the ribs, then a palm strike to the chest. Seagal stepped back to absorb the blows, his expression unchanged, but the crowd knew Dux had just had one of his best moments so far. Seagal responded by increasing the pressure. His footwork became more assertive, cutting off Dux's angles and forcing him to work harder to find openings. When Dux tried another sweep, Seagal anticipated it, stepping around and using the motion to guide Dux's balance sideways. It didn't put him down, but it halted his momentum. By now, both were breathing harder. Sweat marked the mats where their feet had planted and pivoted. Yet neither slowed down. The exchanges continued, Dux's speed and unpredictability against Seagal's reach and control. The spectators could sense they were watching something unusual. This wasn't a Hollywood fight scene. This was two men, each with their own distinct style and history, trying to impose their will on the other, and so far, neither had managed to do it for long. The tension in the dojo was thick as they circled again, each waiting for the moment that could shift the fight decisively. The rhythm of the fight had settled into a careful back and forth, but under the surface, fatigue was creeping in. The bursts of movement were sharp and fast, but the pauses between them had grown just a fraction longer. Both men knew that as tiredness set in, the risk of making a mistake rose. They also knew that at this point in the fight, a single mistake could decide everything. Dux pressed forward again, small traces of sweat catching the light as he moved. He feinted with a jab to the midsection, then snapped a quick hook towards Seagal's side. The taller man caught it on his forearm, his expression calm, but Dux was already stepping back out of reach, refusing to be tied up in one of Seagal's locks. The crowd of onlookers shifted slightly in their seats. They weren't here to see a flashy movie fight. They were here to watch skill meet skill, and that's exactly what they were getting. Seagal adjusted his stance, sliding one foot forward, his weight balanced, his eyes locked on Dux's chest rather than his face. He knew the chest gave away more about an opponent's intentions than the eyes ever could. Dux, light on his feet, kept shifting from side to side, looking for an angle. Then, with no warning, Dux exploded forward. A low kick lashed towards Seagal's thigh, and before Seagal could fully step away, a short punch followed to the ribs. The strikes landed clean enough to make the bigger man exhale sharply. Dux tried to follow with an elbow, but this time Seagal moved in, closing the gap before the blow could connect. He caught Dux's arm, using his own weight to push him backward. Dux rolled his shoulder and twisted free, pivoting away to avoid being dragged down. It was quick thinking, and it earned a few murmurs of appreciation from the spectators. The exchanges became shorter now, both men aware that any attempt to string together too many moves risked getting caught. A jab here, a deflection there, a brief clash of forearms before separation. The tension was thick enough to feel in the air. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see who would make the final move. The final minutes of the match ticked away, and both men knew they needed something decisive. A close contest could be argued either way, but a clear moment of control at the end would leave little room for debate. Dux was the first to commit. He moved in with a combination designed to overwhelm. Low kick, jab, hook, another low kick. The flurry came fast, and while Seagal absorbed some and parried others, the pace forced him to give ground. It was an aggressive push, and for a moment, Dux had Seagal retreating toward the edge of the mat. But just as Dux stepped in for what looked like the finishing strike, Seagal's timing shifted. Instead of moving back again, he stepped forward, letting Dux's momentum carry them into close quarters. His left hand clamped around Dux's wrist, his right pressed against the shoulder, and with a sharp rotation of his body, he redirected the smaller man's energy downward. The takedown was smooth, controlled, and decisive. Dux hit the mat with a solid thud, his back against the canvas. Before he could scramble up, Seagal transitioned into a pin, trapping Dux's arm and shoulder while using his weight and knee position to prevent an escape. Dux tried to roll, twisting to free himself, but the leverage wasn't there. Seagal's control was firm without being cruel, his technique locking Dux in place without risking injury. The referee, seeing that the position was secure and the clock nearly expired, stepped in and called the bout. Seagal released immediately, rising to his feet and offering his hand. Dux accepted, and the two men stood for a moment, breathing hard, sweat dripping, eyes locked. A nod passed between them. No gloating, no hostility, just the quiet acknowledgement of two fighters who had pushed each other to the limit. The applause from the audience was respectful and measured. They knew what they had seen, a contest of skill, control, and timing between two very different martial artists. The official word from the referee was that Seagal had won. He had finished the match in complete control, and his final takedown had been as clean as it was decisive. But the discussions, as people left the dojo, told a more complex story. Some argued that Dux's speed and clean strikes had made the fight much closer than the verdict suggested. Others felt that Seagal's ability to dictate range and shut down attacks outweighed the points Dux had scored with his burst of offense. In truth, it had been close. Both men had moments where they controlled the action. Both had forced the other to adapt. But in the final exchange, it was Seagal who had the timing, the positioning, and the technique to end the match on his terms. The bout was never made public. No cameras had recorded it, and those who had been there understood it was not for mass consumption. Still, over the years, the story spread quietly through martial arts circles, each telling slightly different, but all agreeing on the essentials. When Steven Seagal fought Frank Dux, the match was tense, technical, and decided by a single, well-executed move in the closing seconds. For Seagal, it was a reaffirmation of his real-world skill beyond the films. For Dux, it was proof that he could push a respected, proven martial artist to the edge. And for those who saw it, it was a rare thing. A meeting of two legends whose reputations had followed such different paths, colliding on a single mat in a match that was as much about respect as it was about victory. Which two martial artists would you like to see go head-to-head if you had the opportunity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.